Hi everyone, welcome to the Contra Turtle Show. I'm a 38-year-old Singaporean 9 to 6 worker living in a HDB, simple lifestyle with no car. On this channel, I share YouTube's most transparent stock portfolio and document my journey to a $4.5 million retirement by 50 years old. I'm 4 years into my investment journey so far, with 12 more years left. This episode will be the most controversial one I've ever made. Not only will I expose the darker side of investing in condos, I'll also introduce the H.A.M movement, a new way for Singaporeans to build wealth, completely rewriting our conventional wisdom of flipping condos for retirement that Singaporeans have been following over the last 30 years. Now, there's a good chance I'm going to get a lot of hate after this video, but remember, this is the Contrarian Turtle Show, not the Conforming Turtle Show. As usual, a quick update on my portfolio first. As of today, total profits stands at 272,511 from a capital of 272,651 deployed into the markets over the last 4 years. Year to date, the portfolio has performed at 16% compared to the S&P at minus 3.53%. and QQQ at minus 2.82%, following a strong earnings season from Meta, Exxon, Netflix, Mercado Libre, and Amazon once again. And for the last 4 years, on an annualized basis, the portfolio has returned 23.32% and has beaten the market. So let's begin with the episode. In the 1990s, the government first introduced the Asset Enhancement Plan to increase HDB flat values through upgrading. This was done by beautifying HDB estates and improving its facilities. Now, quoting a passage from the National Archives, "By how much have we increased the value of your assets? At the start of upgrading, 3-room flats in this precinct commanded less than $80,000 in the open market. Today, I am told housing agents are offering as much as $160,000. Your assets have doubled in the last 3 years. So doubling in 3 years is equivalent to a 26% CAGR, which is a fantastic return. And this planted the initial idea that property could be used by Singaporeans as the main engine to increase wealth. Shortly after, a local MediaCorp drama called Marriage, Dollars and Cents aired on TV, introducing the 5 C's to Singaporeans: cash, credit card, car, country club, and you guessed it, condo. HDB owners began to use their gains to buy condo and acquire one of the 5 C's in order to climb up the social status ladder. And these 2 pillars form the early foundations of Singaporeans' desire for property. Apart from introduction of BTO, EC, and other government measures, there were 3 sparks that further propelled property investing among Singaporeans. First, after the 2000 dot-com bubble, the world entered an age of decreasing interest rates. And between 2009 to 2022, interest rates were kept ultra low at nearly 0% for most of the 13 years. So this meant that property mortgage was super cheap and you could borrow for next to nothing to buy a condo. Now, around this period, the second spark happened. A personal finance book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki became wildly popular among Singaporeans. I remember when I was in my young 20s, all my family and friends were talking about this book. In fact, Kiyosaki himself even came to Singapore to do book signings at popular bookstore. Now, out of all the concepts mentioned in the book, there was one that stood out the most to Singaporeans, and that was the concept of good debt versus bad debt. Kiyosaki argued that debt used to buy assets like property is good debt because property can make money for you through capital appreciation or rental. And so it was okay to keep accruing more and more debt as long as you were using it to buy assets like property. And this resulted in the third and most important FOMO spark that we see today, which is the rise of the term asset progression, popularized by real estate agencies. Now, looking back at historical interest rates, the period of zero interest rate policy, or ZIRP for short, was a great time for asset progression by properties. Because not only was the property mortgage a good debt, in the words of Kiyosaki, It was also cheap debt during ZERP, and over time, this concept of good debt, however, became sort of glorified by agents into perfect debt, flawless under any macroeconomic conditions. And Singaporeans are encouraged to take on more and more mortgage debt. Now, the problem is that we have already exited the ZERP era, as you can see with the red arrow in the top right image. And despite announcements of a few rate cuts, the Fed has already signaled that we are never going back to zero interest rates again. The past 13 years has been an anomaly because of the great financial crisis in 2008. And this means that property mortgage is no longer cheap debt, but is in fact expensive debt that might not even be worth it, even in the name of acquiring assets like property. But yet, this narrative of asset progression continues until today. Here's a recent interview of Kelvin Fong, Deputy CEO of Propnex.
That's why Robert Kiyosaki said one very important thing. Don't focus on expenses. Focus on the value of the asset that you own, right? And it's very simple, very simple. I just want to ask everybody a question. If today you have a chance to own one property which is $1 million, the next property that you by right you can own is actually a $2 million property. 1 million, 2 million. By right, you can own your 1 million, you can sell it away, you can actually sell and buy a 2 million. But you say, Kelvin, don't want to stress myself because why? What if lose money?
And my 1 million fully paid already.
Yeah, maybe, right? Then I ask everybody a question. What happened when you reach 65 years old? This property never make money. In fact, you buy 1 million, drop 500,000. The 2 million you buy, drop 500,000. So, my question to every one of you here. By the age of 65, even make money, even lose money, which one will you prefer? The balance $500,000 or the balance 1.5 million? You have to ask yourself this question. That's why to me, at least I lose money, I still have more money compared to I keep my old house with $500,000 balance. I think that would be a sad story.
Yes, a sad story indeed, because it encourages Singaporeans to build a house of cards, stacking higher and higher mortgage debt, even in a high interest rate environment. And the focus was mainly on the asset value of the property, if you realize. And large numbers like $1 million, $2 million are thrown out, but the high loan amount and monthly repayment costs are hardly mentioned in the same breath. And here lies the problem, because there's a risk that this debt becomes unsustainable if you or your spouse loses your job and the combined income formula no longer holds, or some unexpected life event happens, like a family member getting hit with an expensive disease, or the cost of living continues to rise and you're simply unable to cope with monthly loan repayments. And on a personal level, I met with a friend at a gathering and we were eating zi cha at a seafood restaurant. And this guy, let me tell you, he lives in a luxury condo. I went to visit before. Amazing place. Branded furniture inside, high floor unit with a top-notch view, plus he drives an expensive Conti car that costs more than $500,000. So for the longest time, for many years, I always thought, wow, this guy is not bad. He and his wife are doing good, man. But during the zi cha meal, he actually asked me and the other friends, is it okay if we just order 2 to 3 dishes max or not? I cannot really afford to pay because it's too expensive. And in fact, after the meal, he asked if we could first help to pay for him, and then he would repay us at the end of next month. And so after I actually went to ask him, and it turns out he confessed and he said that he was actually living paycheck to paycheck every month, and his credit card was literally all maxed out. And he needed to time his cash flow just nice, such that he would have just enough spare cash to pay us back at the end of next month. Guys, this is the real sad story. Is it really worth it just to look glam, even at risk of overstretching yourself and having this house of cards crumble? And if you think these are just one-off stories, just Q1 of this year, Knight Frank reported that the number of distressed property listings for auctioning is climbing as a result of high interest rates over the last 2 years, because more and more people are not able to cope and are in just nice financial arrangements, just like my friend. And the greatest irony is that the creator of the good debt concept himself, Kiyosaki, he has been bankrupt before. And even until today, he is deep in $1 billion over debt. So let me ask you, is this asset progression or is this debt progression. Now, not only that, we have agents talking about creative financing, stretching risk even more. Here's our local Huat Kueh talking about this.
I know one of the key challenge is you can't get enough loan for your second property or for your property. Am I right? Okay, so we talk about creative financing, which a lot of things I cannot touch, but I touch the everyone will know one, which is to show funds, and the other way is to pledge. Okay, show funds, you know how show funds work? The money just screenshot show the bank can already. Really, that's really, you don't need, really. When the bank say, can you show funds? So let's say the show funds is money, I don't care, the banks don't care where your money comes from.
The banks have put stress tests in place to ensure you can really afford the loan that's given. Now, if you have to resort to gaming the system by asking Papa, Mama, Akong, Ama money to gather funds just to show the bank, then it means you probably can't sustainably afford a large loan in the first place, even with 55% TDSR measures. Because remember, TDSR does not consider gyro arrangements like insurance premiums, utility bills, taxes, gym membership and what have you, as well as general expenses that are not on your credit card. And we are assuming that both you and your spouse are going to have steady jobs all the way to sustain the loan in spite of any economic recession. So if you creatively stretch your finances to the extreme, like what Eric Chu here is saying, how sure are you that you can reach the end goal of sell one Huat Kueh, buy two cai dao to retire? And do you really want to live a miserable and risky life like my zi cha friend just to get there? Your house should not be the one retiring richer than you. Now, I know there is a short-term game that you can play by buying a new launch condo, and then you hold it for 3 years until the SSD period expires, and then selling it, employing leverage along the way with a loan to get high returns. But in the last 30 years, there have been spans of time where the resale value of condos barely moved. Now, instead of using the general PPI, I've used the resale PPI because it reflects true exit prices on the open market without the distortion of new launch developer pricing that don't reflect open market conditions. So for example, post-1997 Asian financial crisis, condo prices stayed stagnant for 10 years. In 2008, the global financial crisis caused prices to plummet and remain unchanged for 2 years. 2013 and 2018, the government introduced ABSD cooling, stalling prices for 5 and 2 years respectively. So how sure are you that this trend on the right continues? Now remember that leverage is a double-edged sword. If a recession or cooling measure hits around the time your 3-year SSD period expires, or when you TOP, you won't be able to exit right away, and you'll get punched in the face every month with mortgage payments at high interest rates for an indefinite amount of time. And don't forget, progressive payment ends on TOP, so you are doubly screwed. Now I know what you're thinking at this moment. Over the long term, this graph on the right goes up and to the right what? So over the long term, property in Singapore always go up one because land is limited, population is growing. So those who have holding power and can tahan long enough will eventually huat big anyway. And this is when we explore the implication of opportunity costs. Now, it is true that over the last 30 years, condo prices on average have risen by 258% at 4.34% compounded annual growth rate. But do you know that over this same 30-year period, the S&P 500, in spite of all the macro bad news along the way, returned a total of 1,148% at 8.78% CAGR. Even if we factor in the 11% currency depreciation of the USD versus our SGD home currency over this period because of all the money printing and what have you, all those conspiracy theories, that is still a 1,023% return, which means there was a 765% opportunity cost if we had used the same amount of money to invest in the S&P instead of in the condo. Now, one underrated fact that people don't bring up is that the S&P's price growth was also anchored by a corresponding earnings growth of 511% over the same period at a 6.4% CAGR, deeply rooting price action with actual fundamentals instead of mere speculation. So when you invest in a broad market index like the S&P 500, time is on your side. Because if a recession hits, you can simply sit back and have no monthly commitments to force you to DCA or to pay up. You can just wait it out. But with property investing, not only do you face increasing opportunity costs as time goes by, you are also weighed down every month by interest costs and mortgage repayment. So time is very much against you. Now, of course, there might be differences in performance between CCR, RCR, OCR compared to the average resale PPI index that I just showed you. And you could very well pick out a Huat Kueh like Park Esta and you can get great performance. But remember, for every Park Esta, there is a Cui Kueh like Sky Habitat that took 9 years to break even. With entry prices of starting PSF values like this, and expenses like agent fees, interest costs, taxes, and increasing stamp duties, it makes one wonder if condo investing in Singapore today is still worth it compared with previous generations, especially when you're taking the risk of going all in on a single property asset versus spreading your risk across 500 companies in a market index. So, are you truly making your money work for you? Or is the money making you work? Now, to be fair, the scenarios I pointed out so far apply to Singaporeans who can only afford to meaningfully invest in one financial asset without straining yourselves. Meaning, a trade-off decision needs to be made between investing in condo versus stocks. It's a bit like choosing between chili crab or pepper crab. Your stomach only has space for one order and one flavor. But if you are a super high income earner, or you have a sugar mummy that can sponsor you, and if a condo is kacang putih compared to your overall finances, then by all means, go ahead and have both crabs. But for the vast majority of working Singaporeans, including myself, we can only order one crab dish at the start of our young working adult life. For me, I just prefer black pepper crab lah. Also because I'm lactose intolerant and chili sauce makes me want to lao sai. Hey, by the way guys, if you like the content so far, remember to give the channel a bit of turtle power and click subscribe so you can be informed when I push out new content. And feel free to leave a comment below and I'll try to read it, although it's increasingly difficult with a newborn baby. My X account is where I share more technical stuff about technology or the markets. And my Instagram is more for lighthearted slice of life stuff as I work towards my retirement goal. And don't DM me guys, too many to answer already. Just leave your comments on this video instead. Anyway, back to the episode. Now, so far I've only mentioned the financial side of things. How about the quality of life considerations? Some people really like the privacy, the swimming pool, the gym, the barbecue pit, and the function rooms that come with a condo. Facilities aside, I get that you don't need much space to have SEX. But with the sizes of new launch condos continuing to decrease over time, and safety-wise, condos also aren't really spared from break-ins, if you've seen the latest news in Interlace, or the fact that condo dwellers don't get the USAFE and SNCC utility vouchers, it kind of makes you stop to think if getting a condo is kind of a bit like a life downgrade than an upgrade, all things considered. But then why are some Singaporeans still super obsessed with getting a condo in spite of all this that I mentioned so far? In my opinion, the real upgrade is climbing the SES social status ladder. Now, I can understand it's difficult, guys. It's difficult. I've fallen prey to this before. When all your friends around you live in a condo, you feel like an outcast, and then there's immense pressure to keep up with your peers, or you feel like low SES. When you go visiting family at Chinese New Year, uncle, auntie come and ask you, hey, so how what your plans after getting married? How is it? And then the boring answer is, oh, HDB law. But then the exciting answer is, oh, I just bought treasures at Tampines. Then their eyes light up. I get it, guys. It's almost like all the financial pressures I've mentioned so far are worth it, just for those moments of looking atas in the eyes of people around you. What I want to tell you, all of you, is don't be like my zi cha friend. Rich on the outside, poor on the inside. Wealth is what you don't see, guys. Wealth is the nice cars not purchased, the diamonds not bought, the watches not worn, and the condos ignored. Real wealth is invisible. It's savings, investments, unspent money, and the option to do what you've always dreamt of doing since you were young. Not flashy consumption. It's not worth it. And this is why today, on the 15th of May 2025, after 30 years of property FOMO in Singapore, gone are the days where our primary engine of wealth building is through real estate alone. I declare the dawn of a new alternative movement towards financial freedom. Today, I declare the beginning of the Go Ham, Not Glam movement. Now, the idea is to live in a simple HDB and treat homestay property as an expense instead of a capital tool. Upgrade to a larger resale HDB only if you really need it. Example, more space for your family, and if you can afford it. And the naysayers will say that only when you're young can you get a long loan tenure for private property. But guys, don't trade 30 years of peace just for a few minutes of pride. Avoid cars and ridiculous COE. Take the MRT, bus, or even Grab taxi instead, and keep your expenses low. Market index invest into broad diversified assets like the S&P 500 and compound for a period of at least 15 to 20 years and beyond. Make sure you have 6 to 12 months of savings and essential coverage like insurance before you invest. Don't go glam if you can't afford it, because it's all great looks and all mortgage. Hope you enjoyed this episode, everyone. May the turtle compounding spirits be with you as you work towards financial freedom. Remember, if you ham now, you will Huat later. Thanks for watching, everyone.